A quiet beat fills the chilly air as you sit beside me on a frozen winter night. The car heaters pump out warmth and you wipe away the fog covering the front windshield as I turn into a large, empty parking lot, covered in almost a foot of snow. The yellow lights of my car mix with the white streetlight and illuminate the undisturbed winter landscape before us. But that's all about to change. I turn up the volume a bit and begin to plow through the snow. The first few times around, nothing much happens as my car carves out an oval shape, but the song is beginning to ramp up. After a few more times around, I turn up the volume once more and you can feel the bass. I look over to you as I'm about to hit the straightaway. Are you ready? I ask, grinning like a madman. Before you can even reply, the beat drops and my car's engine roars to life. The car fishtails as it kicks up snow, and you smell gasoline and the hot air pouring from the heaters. The plastic shakes as the bass pounds through you and you grip your handrests. We continue to pick up speed. At the end of the track looms before us, but I show no sign of slowing down. Then, without warning, I jerk on my wheel to the right and yank the emergency brake. My back wheels slide out in front and we bulldoze into the untouched snow. A white wave crashes into the driver's side and washes over the top of the car as I complete the drift. And right as the car comes to a stop, I release the emergency brake and my wheels find purchase. I look over to you, that stupid grin still plastered to my face, as I make my way back to the track to do it all again. Well, there you have it. A slightly romanticized and embellished account of what I spent a significant portion of my day doing after the sky gods decided the color was overrated and that the world looked better in a literal foot of white powder. No, it was actually really fun. I ended up doing drifting like 3 times that day, and while the first time I went was with my cousin Morgan and Grace, which was kind of meh, at the end of the night, I got drifting down to a science. However, I may have gotten a bit too excited in hindsight and pushed my car too hard. During said later drifting session, I mostly disregarded all the questionable sounds and lights it yelled at me with and kind of ripped the plastic guard off the front of my car. So, yeah. But thankfully, it seems to be almost so right now. Keyword mostly. And it was really fun. Who knew I enjoyed drifting so much? Not me. But anyway, oddly enough, enough about drifting and making all you Kiwis jealous of Colorado's snow. That was part of the reason why I chose it for me by intro. Let's get into life and stuff. Let me start off by saying that at this point, I've kind of got my life down to a science. In short, what I did last month can be pretty accurately reduced to the following formula, which I will now call Alex's theory of general Alexivity, which is as follows. T equals lambda plus alpha plus beta over the change in... Oh, I forgot that one. Here I have taken Calc 3 and I forget the sign for a partial derivative. Whatever. Plus infinite mu. In short, this means as follows. Time equals life divided by school plus work plus changing social events plus an infinity of other things I should do. And unfortunately, no matter what values I put in, the result I get out is always approximately 0. At the moment, I suspect the infinity to be the culprit. So, I don't know. I guess there's part of me that is grateful I have so much to do. And that's all worth doing. But on the other hand, it does make it quite hard to choose other things that are worth doing because you're necessarily not doing something else worth doing. It's like if you were, a one-handed animal rescue fanatic and you carefully were using your one and only hand to keep a puppy safe from falling into its untimely death in the lava below. And yes, this is a realistic example that you might find yourself in one day, so pay attention. And then, as you're holding the puppy with your one and only hand, have I stressed that you only have one hand? We good? Just single hand. Everyone understands the thought experiment, Animal-loving self, single hand. Okay, moving on. Then someone chucks a kitten over the lava abyss, and you're forced to choose between saving the puppy or the kitten with your one and only hand. Sorry, just making sure we have one hand. And whichever one you don't save will fall to a painful death in the all-consuming heat of the lava below. I mean, what are you supposed to do in that situation? Should you let the puppy die to save the kitten, or should you not catch the kitten and save the puppy? It's a hard choice. Okay, now for some of you, it's not a hard choice. Makes air quotes, dogs are better than cats, and all that. Blinks twice, and then he suddenly realizes that he only has one hand, and upon making air quotes, he looks down to see that both the puppy and the kitten hurling to their death in the fiery depths below. Oops. But for some of us, the choice isn't so clear. Okay, if I think about it, it would probably be, catch a kitten, because let's be honest, cats are superior to dogs in every way imaginable, unless there's a Five Guys burger. If I had to choose between saving a kitten, a puppy, or a Five Guys burger from their untimely death, I would have to go with a burger. Every time. Anyway, what I'm trying to get at is now that my life is full of things and they're all worth doing, I have to choose between good things, and that's not fun. See, up until this point, my strategy has been get rid of the things not worth doing to make way for the things that are. But I'm coming to the point where I can't squeeze all the things in the cracks anymore, and I'm actually having to pick and choose. And I'm sure there are times that choice is easy, like with the burger example, there's really only one choice that's clearly better than the others. Again, obviously the burger. But there are other times when it's not as clear, especially when it comes to value certain things differently in certain respects. I used to hold this principle of only do those things that were the very best, but now I'm beginning to see, first, why it's probably an untenable position to hold philosophically, and second, why it's stupidly hard to live out. But where rejecting that principle has left me is in this land of nebulousness, where it's not clear what good thing I ought to choose. So yeah, with the net free time I have each week, it's always approximately 0 at the end, and it makes life harder. I'm just going to put it bluntly. But aside from bemoaning the truth of Alex's theory of general Alextivity, there has been some events happening in my life, and I do suppose I should get on to telling you about them. After I finished Last Life of Nemo, I was still feeling pretty sick, so I'll confess I totally binge-watched anime called Shield Hero. Not the best use of my time, I know, but I was diseased, and my other options available to me were limited. Plus, Shield Hero is really good. Either my favorite or close to my favorite anime that I've seen this far. The next morning, I spent some time trying to catch up on the history of philosophy memorization I was behind on. Plus, I also made a t-shirt. See, one of my friends has these punny shirts he often wears, so taking my inspiration from him, I bought these acrylic pens a while back. And, they never come out of fabric. So I've been cutting out stencils with my mom's silhouette and then writing quotes on shirts Neo gave me. It's a pretty sweet deal because, it's way cheaper than getting them individually printed. However, not all of them are punny. Some are just true. Anyway, here's a picture of the front of the t-shirt I made that day. It says, "Genuine doubts are proof of genuine faith." And here's the back. The best t-shirts only quote the most inspiring people. I also put the insignia on the shoulder for the first shirt, and it didn't look so good, so I decided not to do that for the other ones. Oh, and I also stuck all the cutout letters on my sister's face. Well, I actually don't have a reason to say I did that. I just did it. And there's a picture of Grace with her face covered in letters. So yeah, I made a shirt, played D&D, and got home to discover that the JB Weld plus more JB Weld radiator fix hadn't worked after all, and my coolant was once again leaking abundantly. Yay. So the next morning, I took Mom out for coffee, and we had a satisfactory conversation. And then when I got back, I looked at the crack in my car's radiator, thought about it a bit, and then decided what was probably missing was more JB Weld. So I applied copious amounts of JB Weld and pretended for the 5th or maybe 6th time that this was the charm, and that the colloquial definition of stupid wasn't doing the same thing over and over again and continually expecting it to work. After doing that, I was then summoned by Neo to arrive at his house early, wherein I painted upon dice with my gold and silver acrylic pens, and subsequently discovered that paint will not dry on D&D dice. I have no idea why, but we waited absolutely ages and it was still wet, just as it was before. So, yeah. However, despite failing in that regard, the rest of the day was pretty good. We had session 0 for Neo's new campaign. I'm playing a wizard philosopher that broadly knows the Stoic line of thought and is extremely enthusiastic and talks funny. This is Daly's voice, by the way. And then we had Bible study, which may have been meh, but I don't remember the details. I then did the thing I deliberated over for many weeks and hit the buy now button on the pre-order Oculus webpage. Though I will say, now having received the VR headset, it is really cool, and I'm at least 10% sure I don't regret that decision to purchase it over saving a kid in starving Africa. Wow, that sounds really bad when you put it that way. I suppose I should, I suppose in some way it's kind of facetious that you could... that's kind of facetious, as you could put almost anything in that light. E.g., right now I'm choosing to write an email instead of help build a home for some child in Africa. Right now I'm choosing to hang out with friends instead of working to give medicine to some child in Africa. Right now I'm sleeping instead of saving children in Africa, etc. But on the other hand, it still is fairly true. Though I would like to make the case is not obviously as wrong as it seems at first. Okay, philosophy tangent. Warning, philosophy tangent ahead. By reading on, you acknowledge that you feel intensely stupid and lose confidence in those ethical actions you previously found blatantly and obviously moral. All right, let's kick it off this tangent by drawing your attention to the fact that the thought experiment from Peter Singer, which is the name of a philosopher that came up with the thought experiment child thing, I can't believe I forgot his name because he's the biggest ethical philosopher of our day. So the classic thought experiment claims you're just chilling and walking with your, fancy $200 shoes, and then surprise, there's a child drowning in a shallow pond not 20 feet away. At which point we all concede there's an intense intuition that you are morally obligated to save a child, even if it ruins your $200 shoes. And that if you don't, you're a horrible human being. Yada, yada, yada. Okay, cool. Okay, so one more philosophy tangent. Warning, philosophy tangent within philosophy tangent. Man, it's like Inception here. Forget about a dream within dream. We have philosophy nests within philosophy. Anyway, the point is, this philosophy tangent is to remember the ABCATE, which stands for always be careful around thought experiments. The reason why the ABCATE is so important is because thought experiments often serve the sole purpose of giving the reader and philosophers call an intuition pump. And intuition pumps are notoriously misleading. For example, imagine there's a machine that teleports, or that claims teleports his users to different parts of the world by destroying them in one place and recreating them another 10 milliseconds later. You decide to give it a try, and so you step inside. Blink, and you find yourself in an entirely different place in the world. Were you teleported, or do you step into a machine and another person, you 2.0, step out on the other side? Now, from this description, I would imagine most of you, along with myself, at least intuitively think, yeah, I was teleported. Though, of course, I know some of you realize that may be problematic. But now imagine the machine malfunctions, and instead of just one person stepping out 10 milliseconds later, 10 people step out 10,000 years later. Now, does it seem like teleportation? All the persons have the same conscious memory as you do, and all of them think themselves to be the real you. But clearly, you can't all be 10 of them. You can't be all 10 of them. Or is it the case that they're all fakes and none of them are really you, and there's no longer the you that stepped in the machine? Or another, more empirical example has to do with the classic trolley problem, where participants in the study were asked if they pulled the switch to save the 5-person per classic trolley problem. And the vast majority said yes. But then, however, the researchers changed the thought experiment so as to save the 5 on the track, one would have to now push a fat man into the train's path and kill him. Upon doing so, the vast majority of participants in the study then articulated that it seemed they ought not push the fat man, even though, if you're super principled, in neither case did your intuitions budge. It's an empirical fact. The vast majority of people change their stance depending on how the thought experiment is worded. So deal with it. Anyway, the point in all this is that in both thought experiments, nothing that should matter principally changes, and yet our intuitions are nonetheless manipulated. In the first case, it's merely the continuity of consciousness that matters for personhood. Then you are obliged to say that the machine is teleported you regardless of how much time passes and how many clones are created, as long as your conscious experience is continuous, namely you still have your memories and so forth. But if you think the particular matter you were instantiated with is essential to your personhood, then you should say you cease to exist no matter how much the interaction seems like teleportation. Same deal with the fat man. What should matter is you're killing one life to save 5. It seems like it should be irrelevant whether you do so directly or indirectly. But nevertheless, thought experiments are spectacular at manipulating your emotions, and particularly intuitions, and that's why you should always be careful. Now, back to the tangent we were earlier preoccupied in. So having understood the misleading nature of thought experiments, I would now like to give you one more thought experiment to help you ponder. Imagine that, as before, you're walking through the park, but this time you're wearing a relatively inexpensive pair of shoes, but happen to have $200 in your wallet. And as before, you see a child drowning in a body of water nearby, but this time the body of water is a lake, and there's a dock that goes out to the middle where the child is currently drowning. You know that if you don't run along the dock, you won't reach the child in time, and she will die. However, there's also a man with a gun standing in the middle of the dock that assures you he will shoot you should you try and rush past him to save the child, unless you pay a $200 fee. And should you pay the fee and go save the child, or should you let the child drown? The thought experiment is complicated when the next day you are once again walking through the park and you see the same exact situation. A child drowning in the lake. It could be the same or different child depending on the real world circumstances analogous to. And a man with a gun blocking your way demanding you pay a fee to save the child. This happens every day of the week, every day of the month, every day of the year. Should you save the child every time? Or maybe just once? Or should you never save the child at all? As the philosopher I was listening to pointed out, this is not an easy question to answer, and the truth is it's far more analogous to what's happening in the third world countries than the first. The fact is, cruel tyrants often rule these countries, and be it flat out charging a fee to organizations like the Good Samaritan or the Red Cross to allow them entrance, or requiring charities to hire their men, or by stealing their possessions from the needy, after the charities have left, these evil governments profit from the donations, given to help the needy. There is, in effect, always a man on the bridge demanding a fee when it comes to real life. Not to mention the fact that this is going on every day of every week of every month of every year. So, ought we pay the $200 fee to save the child, even though we know doing so propagates the society's states of affairs that are responsible for why this child is in the position she's in the first place? Be it through funding dictators, undermining the economy, or whatever else. I'm not saying the answer is clearly no. I'm just claiming the answer isn't clear. And just because a certain moral thought experiment can be particularly convincing doesn't mean it really revealed some moral imperative or truth that was prior hidden to us. So yeah, basically, I heard that second analysis of Peter Siegfried's thought experiment and thought a little while after hearing it, and the philosopher made some pretty good points, so I thought I'd share that with you. So there you are. I hope you have been enlightened by this philosophy tangent, and I will walk away realizing ethics is a stupid hard discipline, and whatever principle you presently hold is probably false. You're welcome. Anywho, after the purchasing of said VR headset, I went home at a reasonable hour, which was a first. I got to play some Dutch Blitz with my fam before cranking out some Bible reading and rounding up the night with some anime. Monday morning, I had school, as per usual, and then discovered that I had copious amounts of JB Weld, which had once again failed me. Maybe seventh try is the charm. Wherein I drove to work, and my radiator was still leaking coolant as I did so. I then did work and went home. I then tried to talk to William as I stuffed my face with something to eat before I arrived at home. Before I arrived at anime night, only for the anime we were watching to get all romantic, so Joe kind of skipped that bit for my sake. I then had a great conversation with everybody, mostly Joe, about what constitutes personhood. And after 3 hours, I think I finally convinced him to join me on the dark side. Raises his hand and cackles. Aristotelian metaphysics! Oh, and we were also discussing Zeno's paradox, and Caleb legit pulls in Aristotle. Everyone's giving their attempted solutions about how it's possible for something to move, and then Caleb just casually looks up, from his phone, thinks about it for a minute, and says, "It could be that time, like space, is infinitely divisible. For each segment of infinitesimal distance, there's an infinitesimal amount of time." Okay, I worded that a bit clearer, but still, Like, did you seriously come up with the exact solution to one of the possibly greatest, philosophy paradoxes ever live? Sheesh. First Joe and now Caleb. I need to pick up my game or I might lose my all-knowing, ultimately wise prodigy philosopher title. And yeah, everyone totally calls me that. No sarcasm whatsoever. From now on, whenever you desire to address me, I will only respond to that title. That or Sage. Sage must live on. But yeah, it was a good night. Lots of good conversations. And then I went home at like 1 in the morning. And Ben, who's practically nocturnal at this point, was like, hey, do you want to drive around with me blasting loud music? And I was like, yeah, okay. So we did that. We drove around for like a solid hour playing some of the most upbeat songs at volume level 2000 and possibly speeding slightly. But hey, Ben was driving, not me. Here's a real pic quick of the quality car. And here's a picture of me accurately summarizing the state of affairs that hour. Yep, that's how my face looked. And yeah, that was fun. And one of the first things me and Ben had done together in quite a while. So bro bonding and all that. Tuesday, I practiced being sleep deprived. I did math for 2.5 hours. I went to work and was forbidden from attending Rasher Christie due to my previous illness. I worked on t-shirts and did government homework. And here's the t-shirts I made. Don't think you have the right to think you're right until you know why the smartest people think you're wrong. And the back says, feel free to intolerantly demand I'd be more tolerant. And here's the other one, the best quote from the best philosopher. This quote's quite hard to read. It says, those who deny the first principle should be flogged and burned until they admit it's not the same thing to be flogged and not flogged and not burned. And here's the back. Me, I said that. The next day, I had school, and it was a beautiful day outside. Here's 2 pictures. Wow, that is a beautiful tree. And since I assure you, it has become substantially less beautiful since then. But it was nice for like 3 days while it lasted. I then went to work as per usual. I had a normally strong sense of contentment, which was weird. I then came home, painted my insignia on the back of my phone case in gold, and it looks pretty good, if I do say so myself. I then bladed, since it was super nice out, played some Dutch Blitz with the fam before going 3 hours straight of MATLAB death. MATLAB is an engineering software of sorts, and it's painful. I then ran out of the night with some Bible reading and anime. The next day, school was really light on work, so I had an unusual amount of free time, which I used to productively shoot squirrels while that were eating out squash with an airsoft blowgun that I made way back. And it was actually pretty enjoyable. I originally went outside to sit in the sky chair and memorize his philosophy, but one doesn't get the opportunity to shoot squash-rating squirrels every day, so I decided to take it. I then went to work as usual, and upon arriving home and seeing my radiator still leaking, I decided there was a slight possibility reapplying JB Weld would not do the trick. So I decided to drive over to my cousin's in hope that he, with all his fancy mechanical stuff, could fix it. Well, I got there, and we decided the best approach was to try and weld the plastic together with a highly advanced technique that he'd been learning in welding class called torch it, then smear the plastic with a screwdriver. I know, it's pretty technical, and if you can't understand it, don't feel bad. So yeah, here's a pic of that taking place. So I just looked it up, and it turns out coolant is flammable. Who knew? In hindsight, that would have been something good to know before literally taking a superheated torch to the thin plastic that's been containing copious amounts of coolant. But we didn't do that. I don't know. I guess we both assumed that with a name like coolant, there was no chance this thing could explode in our faces. But apparently we were wrong. See, this is why you name things. What you name things matters. So yeah, we, meaning me and David, as I supervise, aka watch nervously, torched the plastic of the radiator to find that it was completely ineffective. And so we scraped all the torch plastic off and instead superheated a screwdriver and melted a zip tie into the crack and smeared the plastic around for like a solid hour, which was surprisingly pretty effective. I mean, in the end, my radiator looked like it had been barfed on by a dragon and then burned to a crisp over an oven. But, it did function as I drove home. My radiator looked like this. And then, lo and behold, it starts leaking again. So yeah, that was the last straw, and I finally decided it was probably time to just, fork out the cash and get a new radiator. So I went to the auto parts store, handed over $130, which I know isn't bad comparatively, but it's still a good chunk of cash for me. And then I got home and did homework, as well as I talked to Liam over Discord while painting some more t-shirts. The next day, namely Saturday, this is literally how my day went. I wake up. I work on replacing my radiator for a solid 4 hours and 30 minutes straight. I then barely get my car off the jacks in time to take a 5-minute shower and do the de-auto fluidify myself before stuffing Grace's old mac and cheese in my mouth and driving to D&D and playing late into the night. Now, I must say, the timing on the radiator replacement, while excruciatingly long, was nevertheless pretty great, as I don't know if there was some divine orchestration in there, but if there was, does a quick pray hands motion. Thank you. Here is a pic of my newly installed, yet not exploded, keyword yet, radiator. Here, I'm sure you're dying to see the radiator, and it was very hard to put in, so I'm proud of myself. Boom, a radiator. So yeah, D&D was good. XA12 and Tinkertop, you may remember them earlier, teamed up to form what was the affectionately deemed Tinker 12, and together they had the ridiculous combined speed of 300 feet per turn. There was this whole man-eating worm thing they were distracting that was they were distracting them from to allow the party to enter this underground temple. And it was great. Here is some fan art Sydney drew of Tinker 12. Sunday morning, I woke up and did my best to catch up on the Bible reading for 2 hours. As I write this, I may or may not be 2 weeks behind. I went to Neo's house where I played my first session as Thales, ate copious amounts of food, and debated if homosexuality was wrong with the resident lesbian in our group. Well, the real debate was basically me going full Catholic and giving reasons why even contraception was morally evil and let everyone trying, but failing to beat my arguments. I've got metaphysics and teleology on my side. Just try and fight me. So yeah, the debate was really everyone against me, who was the only one with a really principled position, as is often the case. But I held my own, though that was mildly intriguing. After that, I went to a Walmart run with Neo, where we had deep convo, before Sydney basically said, "Alex, your hair looks awful. Can I cut it?" And I was like, "Yes, please," because barbershops are utter death, and I have to engage in small talk for ages, or else I face the unbearable presence of awkward silence, which is even worse. And I'm paying for this whole unpleasant experience. If hell isn't populated with barbershops, I will be amazed. So yeah, she did that, which I was quite grateful for. And while Neo and I played Halo, and I got utterly crushed, as per usual. We then did some dishes, and I called it a night. The following Monday, I had school and then work, and I took Grace shopping for some jewelry stuff she needed, which took 10 times longer than it needed to. I blame excessively long encounters on her female characteristics. She then finally decided what she wanted to buy. I drove over to Joe's house for anime night, and we watched this decent movie called Paycheck instead of an anime. Because earlier we were talking about this thought experiment, and Joe and Caleb decided to be statistically abnormal and blatantly irrational, deciding they were cool with the most excruciating torture imaginable for 2 solid years, as long as they couldn't remember it afterward. Who thinks that? But anyway, Joe, like every member of this family that joined this conversation, kept independently saying, "Oh, you mean like Paycheck?" So I figured it must be a decent movie. So if it impacted everyone so much, we had to watch it. And so we did. So yeah, we did that, and the movie was decent. It was old, and it had like the common old movie problems, but the concept was cool. So yeah, we did that, and we talked late into the night. The following day proceeded as follows. School, work, more school, then Ratio Christi. We had a pretty in-depth conversation about divine simplicity and to the Trinity, and the conclusion we reached is that to espouse the Trinity, we're really just saying magic words, because we literally have no univocal definition of what the Trinity actually entails. Plus, as I've irkingly pointed out numerous times, the Church Fathers were vexingly clear and thorough that any idea of the Trinity or incarnation that made philosophical sense was deemed heresy. So yeah, if anyone asks you, what makes the Christian different from the non-Christian, you can just say, the magic words, my friend. The magic words. The next morning, I had more school and more work, and then even more school, and then I watched anime. The following day, I got accepted to Mines. A tiny little party can goes off. But that's completely useless, as I'm no longer planning to graduate this year, so I couldn't accept it if I wanted to. But I guess it's still a bit of a flex, as Mines is one of the hardest to get into colleges in Colorado, so there's something like that. So yeah, after that, I read some Bible, and then Sydney texted me and informed me of the very essence of magic. VR headsets had been delivered to their door in a box, so I begged my boss to let me off work, and he said yes, which is why he has 2 boss brownie points, and I rushed over to Neo's house, where I saw this beauty waiting for me. Now, if that's not the essence of magic, I don't know what is. So, like good patient adults, me and Neo ripped the box open immediately. Okay, we actually did manage to wait like 10 minutes before opening it at my house. We then spent the next 80 or so hours playing VR, and I introduced my family to it too. And there were some they were pretty wowed, as you ought be. I'm telling you, if you haven't experienced VR before, it will knock your socks off. So yeah, that was really cool. The next morning, I woke up early to show Grace how to set up the VR headset and let her play a bit before she went to this retreat thing. And the family left, and it was just me and Ben, and I spent the next considerable bit of time setting up the VR headset and playing a ton of Beat Saber. I then played the last soccer game of the season, which was fun, and as always, did some decent dominating. And then Neo came over once again, and we played VR games, and even Minecraft in VR, late into the night, to like 2 a.m. late. The next morning, it snowed, so me and Ben got up and went to go get cinnamon rolls with Morgan, and that time was decent. The conversation was pretty meh. We didn't talk about anything really interesting. But I got to see her apartment for the first time, and it was quaint, Plus, she gave us tea. And I mean, tea makes everything better, not going to lie. But yeah, we then took over her house, in which I showed her VR, which surprisingly she was kind of like meh about, which beats me because VR is like the coolest thing ever. And then Brayden ended up showing up, and we got to have Smash Bros. Set up, and he tried to teach Morgan how to play, and she did not do great. I went easy on her, so she didn't just die. But then, again, she wasn't as bad as I thought, she would be. And then she was like, video games aren't my thing, see ya. And so she vacated the premises, and then me and Brayden switched from playing Smash Bros. To playing Super Hot in VR. And we did that until I had to run for D&D. Also, apparently VR does not work outside, which personally I find super disappointing because I was totally looking forward to playing in just a huge open field. Oh well. But yeah, D&D was good. And XA12 nearly died as these metal-eating worms had burrowed into him and were going to kill him if it weren't for me using literally every spell slot I could to, just keep him alive. Plus one of the characters, Valari, going into him in acidic blob form and then, eating away the worms while simultaneously giving him acid bursts from the inside. Shivers. Yeah, it was not a pleasant experience. And then, since her ooze form, has a time limit, she ended up blowing off one of XA12's arms as she reverted back to her non-ooze form. So XA12 lost an arm for a moment there, but thankfully our dwarf in the party has some strings he could pull, and with the help of Tinkertopper made XA12's arm. But anyway, it was a good D&D session, and after it was over, I drove home and went to sleep. The following Sunday morning, I cleaned, memorized some more of my history of philosophy, played D&D at Neo's house, and then had Bible study in which there was this new guy who at first seemed really smart, but then we got to talking, and he's just really well-read and has a big vocabulary, but doesn't really know what he's talking about once you drill into him. AKA, he turned out to be only sort of smart. But yeah, talked with him and did dishes, as is custom, and Neo and me just played Minecraft in the night. And here, you've got to see how cool Minecraft looks with shaders and mods. Like, here's me building a pirate ship we rated. It looks like from Neo's perspective. It's a picture. That Monday, I did more school and work, but I finally started learning the new history of philosophy again. See, as of late, I've been trying to catch up on the history of philosophy, and I got to the point where I've memorized the past stuff and was able to move on to the new stuff. So yeah. I then did some paperwork for something. I have no idea what it was. And then went over to Joe's house for anime night, and we didn't end up watching an anime as I brought my VR headset over, and we just played with that, which was fun. Then that night, we talked about reasons why why views about free will are quite challenging and have problems with both sides until it was really just me and Joe. But later that night, Zach joined in, and we had a long conversation about the Bible or philosophy. Well, if the Bible or philosophy was the primary source of knowledge, and everything else was built on it. I doubt you can guess my position. But yeah, Joe was planning to kick me out at like 12, and we ended up staying up till like 2. So yeah, I need to work on sleeping at reasonable times. Day after that, I did some school, went to work, tried to get my own bank account closed. I am now with Discover because it's superior in every way. I get like 1% interest and like no late fees. So that's definitely better. After that, I went to Ratio Christie, where we argued about if one was morally obligated to vote, after which much back and forth, I was persuaded that it was a moral obligation to vote. Though it's not nearly as strong a moral obligation as people make it out to be. It's like as much a moral obligation to recycle, as I think Americans over-exaggerate the voting obligation. But nevertheless, it's an obligation. So yeah, after we sorted that out, we talked about the stupidity of confusing dual agent causation. We talked about the stupidly confusing view of dual agent causation, which we are far from sorting out. I still think it's metaphysically impossible. That Wednesday, I found out that Crestbridge, the full ride scholarship program, said no, so that was sad. And besides that, the day was average, schoolwork and all that. After that, I went to a youth group event, which was average as well, and studied math for ages upon returning home. Thursday was more school, more work, more homework, and then engaging with Morgan some more before playing VR. I did some Bible reading and then watched some anime. On Saturday, I woke up at like 10, went over to Braden's house because he invited me and his conservative friend over to his house to debate abortion, which I was like, oh yeah. But his friend arrived late, so we just played Smash Bros. Until he got there. But once he got there, we had a decent conversation, though it was kind of me and Braden's other friend taking turns yelling, telling Braden why he was wrong. I mean, because he is. So I would say the debate was a bit more one-sided insofar as Braden was kind of on the back foot the whole time, especially since I have a very principled reason to say fetuses are humans. But yeah, in the end, it was a pretty good discussion, and I was mostly glad that Braden initiated it. No. Right after that, I went straight to D&D for the last session of John's campaign. It was a pretty tough last battle. In the end, one of our party members died, but it was pretty good. And in the end, the whole thing was pretty sad to see finish. It was tragic. In the end, XA12 had a base AC of 27, which is stupidly high, and was able to bump it up to 34 if needed. I mean, I would call that a success, especially since in the end, XA12 was only at level 13. So yeah, the campaign ended, and most of us lived. Sunday morning, I went to breakfast at Silver Grove with the fam and Morgan, and everyone talked about boring things, so that was mad. After that, I took Morgan and Grace out drifting, which was okay, though not as good as I was hoping. And I don't know if they enjoyed it or not. Then after that, I headed straight to Neo's house, where we all played D&D, which was good. And then I did dishes with Neo before taking him out drifting. At first, he was like, meh, but it grew on him as the night wore on. And so we came back. So when we came back, some of the girls who had come for Bible study walked in and were asking for a ride home. Thus, since my car was already warm and it was de-snowed, we just, had everyone pile in the car and I took them home. But then, after I dropped them off, Neo and Sydney and I were close to the drifting place, so I convinced Sydney to join us, and then all three of us went drifting, and that was pretty great. I know Neo enjoyed it. Sydney said it was better than she expected. Plus, that was, plus that I drive better than she thought. So I would say that was a win in the end. Then once we got back, Neo and I played some video games before I called it a night. And my car also got stuck. So after trying to get out for like 15 minutes, I had to wake up Neo and ask him if he was willing to help me get out of my car. So he was. That was gracious of him. Next morning, all those nights caught up with me, the late nights, and so I barely got myself out of bed to watch the lectures. And then once my bloodshot eyes had stared at a screen for 2 hours, I went back to sleep because I needed that. After that, I had work, then school, and then I got another t-shirt made. Here's a picture of that. Next time someone asks you, what would Jesus do? Remind them that making a whip and overturning tables is within the realm of possibilities. I then played some VR and did some homework, which is always lots of fun. The next day I had school, work, and the whole 9 yards. And then went to Ratchet Christie, which was good. And there was this new girl there that I actually thought was pretty great. And we had an awesome debate, as per usual. Wednesday, I had more school, more work, more youth group, and then spent the night just making t-shirts and watching super boring government videos. Here's one of the other shirts I made. Philosopher. Adults who persist in asking childish questions. And the different one says, you can safely assume you have created God in your own image when it turns out God hates all the same people you do. Thursday, I had school and work once again before playing VR and starting this very Life of D email. Look, past me is catching up with present me. Then yesterday I worked on this Life of D email. Voted! There, you happy now? I did it. I fulfilled my civic duty. And then I signed up this Colorado Leadery Die contract. And then finally, I worked on this Life of D email and had dinner with Mom and Dad's old teacher, which was meh at best. And then I worked on this idea that Ben came up with. So see, Ben was talking with me and saying that it might be a good idea to record myself reading Life of D emails, because it's not like he doesn't want to listen to them. It's just that he doesn't, want to take the time to read the whole thing. So he convinced me, and I'm now starting a YouTube channel where I'm officially reading my Life of D emails. So yeah, I'm starting the first Life of D email I ever wrote, which is really cheesy, trust me. But yeah, I'll put the link here, and you guys check it out and tell me what you think. And if you like it and think it's worth doing, then I will do it. But if not, you should let me know before I put all the work into it. Also, you should all give me a criticism of the presentation. Oh, interesting. I don't know what that means. Oh, I see. You should give me criticism on my method. So yeah, that happened, and then I got to today. Today I just worked on this Life email, and also my parents had Noah and Melissa over, which was great because they're still here. And yeah, hope you found this email informative, and I'll talk to you all soon.